Happy 2022.
Happy Fumfa Live New Year. Chris, I put welcome from Chris and Katie here, but I feel like I usually put the reading number here too. Did I forget?
I think you did.
Formatting here?
Number
did I
78.
It's reading number 78, and it's recent grad night. It is an extremely special night for us. I mean, every night is a special night, but hold on here. Let me fix this. Let me put a little 78 on here. Come on, Katie. Everyone needs to know it is Fumfa 78 recent grad night. All right, Chris. We'll save the rest of that for our official welcome. Tell me what you are drinking this beautiful January 9th, Sunday, January 9th of the new year, 2022.
Look at that.
Oh, it's a dark beer.
It's got that Guinness.
That Guinnessy look about it.
Wow. I know I could just watch that for
a long time. It's mesmerizing.
So all those people in Irish bars, that's what they're doing. They're just sitting there watching.
They're just spacing out into like heavy dark beer land, right? Chris, tell me what kind of beer that is. Is that a stout?
It's a Guinness.
It's a Guinness.
Stout. It's Guinness stout.
I love that. I was TikToking a little bit today, and I was scrolling through TikTok, and I saw an Irish tarot card reader, and she said the cutest thing I've ever heard, which might be a very normal thing to say, but it was the cutest thing I'd ever heard. She said, "I'm having a wee cheeky Guinness." And I was like, oh, she's stolen my heart. Chris, are you having?
I'm gonna remember Guinness? That a wee cheeky Guinness. With my Ohio accent, it doesn't quite come off the tongue.
Well, Chris, I'm just having a wee cheeky glass of Prosecco to ring in the Fumfa Live New Year. Tonight is recent grad night. We're very excited. We have Mom and Dad in the chat saying, welcome back, Chris and Katie. Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Happy New Year, Mom and Dad.
Happy New Year. Well, speaking of, we have a lovely dark beer. I have some lovely dark hair over here. Has anyone noticed that I dyed my hair black?
Oh my goodness!
Now you do. If you haven't already, what's dark?
Well, sometimes it's hard to tell on these online things, but yeah, that is some dark hair. Look at you,
dark hair.
Adam's Family time.
Yeah. Oh, I'm into it. I love it. I just, I always wanted to dye my hair black one day, and I decided that mid-December, right after our holiday show, was the best time to do it. And I've been having fun with it because it's like some very cool contrast with my crazy colors and all of my fun clothes. Oh, Cam Pierce says, love the hair. Thank you, Cam. Thank you.
Well, assuming she's talking to you, but.
Chris, I'm so sorry. We were just talking about your excellent beard hair care regimen. Chris, tell the audience about your beard hair care. So you have like beard shampoo?
Yes, I do. I have beard. It's beard soap, but it's basically a shampoo. You just soap it up, you get it nice and bubbly,
nice,
sudsy,
cool,
and then it feels sort of clean and soft afterwards, and it's nice. You can brush it without it being painful.
Oh,
kills all the insects that have brewed in there.
I think Chance, one joke Chance has with you is every once in a while when he's popping it, he's putting a comment in the chat here. He's like, "Who's living in Chris's beard?" Terrible Chance.
Oh, well, it's great. So I keep my pen in there. See?
Oh well. Look how useful that is for workshops, Chris. I mean,
I'm so disoriented from.
Oh no. Oh no.
All kinds of
Well,
things in there, Katie.
lots of things indeed. Well, Chris, this is very exciting. Very exciting night tonight. It is 7 o'clock, and we need to welcome the people to Fumfa 78 Recent Grad Night. We have many incredible special guests that join us on our show, but our roots, the core of our group, is alumni, current students, and faculty members of the Fairfield University MFA program. That's where
Fumfa.
Chris and I, Fumfa, that's where Chris and I got our MFA degrees from way back in January 2011. And
That's 11 years ago.
it is a long time ago.
Last week.
it feels like just yesterday.
More or less around this time. Yeah, 11 years. That's insane.
I think it was the 8th. Was it the 8th? It was, we had a long, a few little things have changed. It was either, oh my God, almost exactly 11 years ago.
Exactly 11 years. Jeez.
Oh my God.
Well, here's to it.
Well, cheers. Happy New Year and happy
Here's
graduation.
to our graduation. And then, to the graduations of our esteemed guests tonight.
Our esteemed guests this evening, and especially the most recent grads who graduated this past winter residency, where we very recently gave a presentation about the live stream, and all of you wonderful people watching and our wonderful guests. It's been such an absolute pleasure to do this, and we plan to continue to do it indefinitely. So keep watching, keep following us, keep sharing our stuff, keep telling your friends, and joining us to read as guests, and keep it on with writing too. All right. So we want to, encourage you, support you. We want to hear your work and keep this up. It was just so special to give that presentation and to be back here with you. So Chris, tell us what we have coming up tonight. We have 4 incredible readers.
We do indeed.
Recent grads.
Recent grad, Mr. Piazza,
Mm-hmm.
Holly Hagman, Michael Dunaway, Marie Michelle, 4 recent graduates from the Fairfield University MFA program, Fumfa. And as far as we know, they've graduated. They could be pulling our leg. I don't know. Maybe they...
Christopher.
I don't know, but we'll take their word for it that they graduated.
Yes.
And, congratulations to them, and we're going to hear some of their groovy work. I assume some of the work that they were working on these past couple of years.
Yes, and perhaps some work that they shared at their graduation readings, which is, an event private to the program, but will now be shared with all of us, public, lovely people. And so it's going to be awesome. Also, before we get started, Chris, what do we have coming up next week and in the next few weeks?
All right. Yeah. Next week, we have a very special group reading. These are folks who have been published by Red or Green Books. That's READ, Red or Green Books. And this has been curated by our friend Brian Generalissimo Franco. And so he's going to read, as well as 9 other folks.
Going to be awesome.
Red or Green Books. There's too many of them to name here, but they're all going to be fantastic. So please join us. And then the following week, we have Fumfa grad Ellen Gelman, along with Janet Luongo. The next week, we have Fumfa's own Ana Maria Spagna with Andrea Potos. Then we got Patricia Dunn and Monica Ung the following week. And then that leads us to Romance Night.
Woo!
On February 13th. That's the night before Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So it's going to get hot and heavy in here.
It's going to get steamy and spicy.
If anybody wants to join us for that night, if you have a nice short piece, a poem, or a short, very brief story with a romantic kind of a vibe to it, let us know.
What was that? I like wink twitched.
You did, and my screen froze too. So
Yes,
Like,
reach
yeah.
out to us. We want to get you on the list for that. That will be our first group reading. Well, aside from the Red or Green Books reading, that will be our first group reading that you can sign up for. And we will be reaching out to you about others that are coming up. We do have a winter spring open mic coming up in, I believe, in March. And we are going to do our International Writers Night and several other special events that we will make sure you know about and make sure you know how to sign up for to read with us. So it's going to be great. But without further ado, we need to welcome our first recent grad writer of the night, Rob Piazza. Welcome, Rob.
Huzzah!
Hey, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you, and grateful to be here. And thank you to Chris and Katie for this amazing opportunity and great show. This is such a great service to the community, really.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. No, really, when I was at the seminar that you guys put on about a week ago at the residency, it was just so evident that what you're doing for our community is so, especially during the pandemic. I mean, you guys have kept art and literature alive. So I'm just grateful to be here.
Thank you.
This was a weird week for me. I got tested positive with COVID this week, so I've been a little up and down all week. So I'm
We're just so happy that you're up for joining us.
Exactly. So, and exactly like you said, I want to share with you some work that I had begun and worked on. I graduated almost exactly a year ago. The Hallelujah cohort, I think it was January.
The Hallelujah cohort. Ooh, I want to know.
They called us the Hallelujah cohort, and it was Michael Dunaway, myself. I think Marie was in that group as well. So 3 of us from this group, and pardon me. But so I've been, this past year since I've graduated, I've been sending out poems to magazines individually, and I've had a few of them published. I'm grateful to say, so that was awesome, and now I'm trying to start shifting toward putting a book together.
Awesome, Rob.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share with you guys tonight some of the poems that I'm piecing together for that.
Rob, let me share your bio real quick,
Before
and then
you
Chris
do
and I'll get out of here. We're so excited to hear you.
Perfect.
All right. Rob Piazza. Well, you already heard some great info about Rob. Straight from him, Rob Piazza earned his MFA in creative writing at Fairfield University. He teaches literature and composition at colleges and universities in New England. His poems have appeared in Mystic Blue Review, Halcyon Days, Society of Classical Poets, Haiku Journal, Poetry Quarterly, Founders Favorites, The Lyric, October Hill Magazine, Neologism, Poetry Journal, Heart of Flesh, Literary Journal, and Young Raven's Literary Review. He serves as Poet Laureate of Litchfield, Connecticut. So awesome, Rob. We'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me go ahead and get ready to read these here. This is kind of based a little bit on a work of a poet named Edward Arlington Robinson, who is an older poet from like the early 20th century. And he had this thing of, he created a fictional town and based loosely on his own hometown. And that's kind of what I've been doing in these poems, is creating a fictional world that's loosely based on a place in Pennsylvania. But then it travels from there. And there's characters in here, there's narrative poems. So it's kind of like piecing together this sort of like scenes and little vignettes. So I'll go ahead and start reading a few of these, and they take place primarily in the past. So it's sort of like a memoir in verse. I don't know if any of you had Bill Patrick as your guide or teacher or instructor, but he had shown me that he had written a memoir in verse. This is sort of like a fictionalized memoir in verse. So the first poem is called Adagio, which is a musical term, and music will come up a lot in the poems as well. So anyway, the first poem is titled Adagio. I remember coming home from college to a house where I had never lived for our first Christmas Eve, after you, like Herod, chose to leave with Cheryl, The hot new fitness trainer sporting her leopard skin leotard. The nasty card she left in the elevator devastated Mom with news of your affair. Neither Marcia nor I could acknowledge the empty seat at the dining room table. Amidst the carols, Mom too was unable to grieve this loss that felt like death. I couldn't stomach Christmas meat. Every mouthful fed my anger. Neither could we celebrate the birth of Jesus lying in his manger. Speeding down streets of North Miami Beach, past royal palms wrapped in sparkling lights, we fled to the movies at the Lost Oasis Mall, abandoned except for a flock of Orthodox Jews. I had never felt so utterly alone watching Platoon by Oliver Stone. Dad, why did you decide to go, leaving Marcia and me on our own? I wept through Barber's Adagio for strings in the scene when Elias gets shot. Elias, who'd been left behind, raising his arms like Christ on the cross, while the character played by Martin Sheen looks down on the war from his chopper. Afterwards, a late-night shopper pushed his cart across the vacant lot. And this next poem is a bit of a flashback. The title is After RFK. And I believe this poem is a sonnet. Yeah, it is. This poem is a sonnet of sorts. So after RFK. I'm named for one about whom Lowell wrote that doom was woven in his veins. In June of 1968, my father trained to blow up bridges at an army base in the Show Me State when news ambushed the fort. Bobby had been shot. I'm named for one who dared to ask, why not? Determined not to let the call to seek a newer world lie dead beneath the sign that advertised the once and future king, my father phoned his newlywed and cried, if it's a boy, let's name him after Kennedy. When Bobby died, he left a legacy, funeral trains, a brother slain, and me? Okay, this next poem gets into that fictional world. The town that I'm creating is called Schmittsville, and it's a factory town in Pennsylvania. And so this poem is called Barbershop. And this is one of the scenes. So Barbershop. Old men leaf through girly magazines while Grandpa pumps his shaving cream. Amidst the scent of talc and cologne, a customer dials the telephone. This is April 1975. Oldsmobiles are parked outside. Beneath the upholstered swivel chair lies a devastated grove of hair. Blue bottles of sterilized scissors line the wall-length mirrors. Playing charades, everyone I see reflects a secret part of me. I hide behind model airplane magazines, lost in boyhood fantasies of gunners strafing submarines. Meanwhile, the FM radio drones like engines of bombers chugging along. Grandpop hums Sinatra's songs. Why is my mind a battle zone? Life is hell when Dad comes home from carburetor factories where forges flare 1,000 degrees. He hurls a can of kidney beans at politicians on the TV screen. Spilling a pitcher of lemonade, my mother ducks his hand grenade, and little sister stifles a sneeze. The news reports how Vietnamese teens were raped by U.S. Marines. Behind their napes, clippers buzz like hornets in old men's ears. Grandpop snips their barbed wire beards. Several of these poems are going to go through generations. It's like generations of people that are from this town. So this next poem is titled Rita's Saints. My grandmother Rita had saints in her attic, marble statues painted primary colors, red and blue and white, statues the same height as I was then, around age 10, or maybe I was 8. Their eyes, forlorn and plaintive, would petrify me, life-size effigies of stone. My throat would constrict as tight as drawstrings on bags of marbles. Stanislaus and Aloysius were right beside me, their hands raised in prayer, rosary beads draped around their waists and napes. Scared of the sacred light filtering through the dusty panes, I whispered, "Hail Mary, full of grace." On a winter's night in roughly 1928, Rita's father Eugene had been shot 7 times in the back by screen door face Vigliotti. It was a mafia hit. Later, Screen Door was acquitted by a judge who had been bought. The paper claimed it started as a brawl at the Elks, but that wasn't true at all. My great-grandfather Eugene had refused to squirrel away bottles of booze in the rafters of his barber shop. Behind the ceiling fans up near the roof, their bootleg gin was 100 proof. Rita had found him dead at the top of his driveway. He had gone out to take the trash to the curb when she had heard the 7 shots. Later, he barely got a blurb in the policeman's blotter. His obituary mentioned a word or two about his surviving daughters. Rita was 10 or maybe 8. Her older sister Mary had been raped before she suffered schizophrenia. The cops had found her lying nude behind the Elks in puddles of blood. This all took place in Pennsylvania, where wardens from the state took her away in leather restraints. Which brings me back to Rita's saints. When I was a boy, I'd climb the stairs to Rita's upper loft, past the chairs where Uncle Eddie sometimes snoozed, and then up another flight toward the ceiling, rafters, and roof into Rita's upper room, silent as a Roman catacomb with its life-size statues painted blue and white and red. "Blessed is the fruit of thy womb," I said. Were the saints a tribute to Rita's dead father, a shrine to Mary mentally screwed and locked where nobody cares? Or was the attic Rita's heaven guarded by Saints Anthony and Jude, celibate in their celestial sphere up there at the apex of the house? Rita's saints often inspired fear in me, choked me, took my breath away, and made me feel faint. I imagined Magdalene had moved on her own when my back was turned. Her eyes appeared to follow me. Even though I knew that they were there, Rita's saints would catch me unaware every time I poked my head into the attic, her private place of prayer. Once I stroked the face of Mary, Queen of Sorrows, cold as death, with 7 daggers in her heart, one for every grievance she endured. What is prayer but my heart's complaint? Inside my soul, I cherish Rita's saints. So that was a longer poem, and this next one is actually a villanelle, which has those repeating lines. And this picks up on one of the characters mentioned in the earlier poem. It's titled Pilgrim State. So change of setting a little. Pilgrim State. Uncle Eddie cops his methadone in Somerville's rehabilitation center. Swearing she's going to leave him alone, Sharon hopes this time he's finally done shooting junk. Maybe he'll get better if he downs his daily methadone. He calls her weekly on the telephone, his hand too jittery to scrawl a letter. Sharon swears she's going to leave him alone on Thanksgiving Day. He might come home if she washes all the crap he sent her. Uncle Eddie sells his methadone to skinny whores who trash the combat zone with hypodermic needles. So much litter. Sharon's better off living alone. She tears roasted turkey from its bones and drowns some rolls in melted butter. Uncle Eddie chews his methadone, but Sharon, bless her, cannot eat alone. In continuing that same setting, this poem is titled Mass Mental. Rusty mangles the TV guide. As the world turns, the wide world of sports, outside, the world hurts. Easter 1989. In the psych ward, Rusty cries, lamenting vehicular homicide. Irish whiskey made him blind to gutters, sidewalks, yellow lines. In the haze, his Chevrolet collided with a mommy and her only child strolling to St. Bartholomew's. If only he hadn't decided to turn down Beacon Street and ride the tracks on Massachusetts Avenue. Drinking through the night, he tried to make it home before the 9 o'clock mass with his weary wife. Half his wheels on the curb, his Monte Carlo ran askew. Cockeyed, not sure what to do, he mowed the jungle smooth. In the army, he'd driven tanks. Now he has the Lord to thank he's got one leg, not two. Rusty had served in Vietnam. Rusty swerved, but not in time. Rusty struck them from behind. He wishes he could push rewind to watch an earlier episode, skipping reruns of Wheel of Fortune. This next poem is a sonnet, I believe. Yeah, it is a sonnet. And it's titled Felonious Punk. A little play on words there. Felonious Punk. When the handcuffs clicked around his wrist and the cops declared his rights, he knew there was something he had missed, robbing an ATM at night. He forgot about the camera that photographed his face while he fed phony slips into hungry slots. Not worried about security or police, his mind was zooming focused on another bag of pot. Those Rutland cops did not take long to match his picture to his name. They found him in his bedroom necking a 3-foot bong. The clicking of the cuffs was not the only sound to wake the house on that December night. His mother's sobs would amplify the blight. This next poem is a little shift of tone. These last poems, as you may have picked up, are sort of painting it black. This poem is a little bit of a shift, but the setting is still in the Northeast. Title is Boston, 1989. And I believe this is also a sonnet. Yeah, it is. Boston, 1989. The AA meeting sparked another revolution. There was that time Bobby B punched a guy in the jaw during the butt break behind St. Francis Rectory. We were bounced from a basement on Boylston Street when Barbara's cigarette ignited the trash. There was Tommy D, a homeless sot who reeked of shit, character from Dickens' Old Magwitch on the Marsh. We took him in despite his bigotry. There was Big Willie, black man with a cyst on the nape of his neck. We joked it was his resentments. There were rummies carried in drunk, winos tossed out forcibly for disruption, all this for $1. And yet we found sobriety, a turnaround we won't forget. Back to the musical theme here. A mazurka is, it's sort of like a folk waltz, I guess, but Eastern European usually, but the Italians have tons and tons of mazurkas, and this is an Italian mazurka. So it's a piece in 3/4 time. So the title of this poem is called Mazurka. When I botch a chord or buzz a 16th note, Grandpop whacks my wrist with his horsehair bow, slick with rosin as a hickory stick. He looks like a rider from Tennyson's Light Brigade charging the Cossacks. Grandpop slays his violin. Above the bar in his cellar, above the bottles of brandy and gin, he displays the Nazi saber he'd swiped from the corpse of an SS officer, the sword he'd found somewhere in France after a battle. The dead were strewn across a field like notes across a musical score. As a medic in want of thread, he'd borrowed horsehair to sew a gunner's fingers back onto his mutilated hand. The gunner had been a drummer in the army marching band. Now he wants me to attack this mazurka with my guitar, starting at the 7th bar. Grandpop strikes my music stand with his bow, his rider's crop, a strident general giving commands. This next poem is called The Toll, and I'm going to just read it straight out. It just goes like this. The toll. My father's deaf in one ear, his left. I've often felt left out. I shout, mouthing my words, turn right at the next light, not here. My father steers his convertible car past titty bars, past shopping malls, children's hospitals, towards the Everglades, on roads as straight as the scars on my wrist. I'm afraid he'll collide head-on with tourists from Maine when the red light's blinking. I can't stop thinking how I drove blackout drunk from Miami to West Palm. Coming to, I played it calm even though I was terrified. He cannot read my lips. He shouldn't drive so far, so fast, yet he insists. Sometimes I fear God himself is nearly deaf. I cannot speak about the 20 years you disappeared, how you were gone when Jenny was born. I couldn't reach you on the telephone. My words fall short as coins I toss, missing the toll. I think I should probably stop right there. I want to be mindful of time.
Rob, I'm so sorry. You are rocking it, but we do have to we have to ask you our questions before we say goodnight to you.
Absolutely. No, let's stop right there. No, thank you so much.
That was fantastic.
Was he not amazing? Absolutely incredible, very powerful poems. Each one like extremely vivid. I'm like in the world of all these different characters and like and feeling the pain and the grit in there too. Absolutely incredible work, Rob.
Right.
Thank you so much. Thank
very
you.
vivid family, and my question is, if I may, it's just, I mean, I love the idea of, memoir and verse, and then you added fictional. So, my question is sort of the obvious one. It's like, well, okay, where's the line? Not that you have to tell us, point by point, but, do you have like an uncle who, you sort of remember a story about, and then you just make stuff up to fill it in, or what's your process with that? Like,
you're doing so amazing with it.
Very novelistic, I mean, it's in verse, obviously, but it's like, this family and this town and everything. So
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it's all semi-autobiographical, based on people I knew growing up, people I've met, people that I had as friends. Often out of respect for them, I'll change names, change places, change settings.
right.
So yeah, stuff like that. But I would say all of it comes from either lived experience or observational, awareness, like things I've seen, things I've watched, people I've met, and then I'll just kind of tweak it, shape it,
Sure.
stuff like that. Yeah.
So cool, Rob. We're before you came to the MFA program, before you met someone like Bill Patrick, who has done a lot of the memoir in verse type stuff. Were you doing this type of writing? Were you doing formal memoir in verse using these various forms as well? Was that something you were very drawn to, and Bill was like the perfect match for you?
Yeah, I think Bill and Baron Wormser Baron Wormser was a huge positive influence on me. And I had met him before I came to Fairfield. I had met him at a reading in New Haven, and we connected. And then my mother-in-law had sent me a book of his once, and I had already known. Yeah, so I had known about Baron. He was a big draw for me coming to Fairfield, and he helped me so much. I was already writing in form. I was already writing drafts of these poems in this world. I think the thing that Fairfield helped me the most with was revising. Like,
awesome.
Yeah, I was pretty good at generating stuff before I came to the program, but all the revising and editing and tweaking, that was all stuff I learned at Fairfield, which was a huge gift.
Rob, that is so great. That is so awesome. We wish we keep you, and you know what? We're just going to have to bring you back for a feature reading on another night. I still have a million more questions I want to ask. We loved your poems. You got to go take a look at the comments on Facebook, on YouTube. You've gotten so much love. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and please take care of yourself and feel better.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys are the greatest. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much,
a lot of fluids.
Thank you.
Wait, I missed that. What did you say, Chris?
I said drink a lot of fluids. You get the ginger ale, or it's like, man, nothing tastes like ginger ale when you're sick. It's like, oh man, is that good stuff?
It is the good stuff. Chris, I mean, we're already having an absolutely incredible night, and we have 3 more incredible recent grads to welcome tonight to hear from, and we need to welcome up Holly Hagman. Hey, Holly.
Hello.
Well, Chris, would you do the honor of reading
Absolutely.
Holly's bio for us?
Absolutely. Holly Hagman is a teacher and writer from a small town in New Jersey. She graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson University with her BA in creative writing and her MAT in secondary education. She also earned her MFA in creative nonfiction from, where else? Fairfield University. She has been a nonfiction editor for magazines such as Brevity and Variant Literature. She enjoys collecting coffee mugs and napping with her cats.
Sounds good.
We heard from one of those cats earlier, but they've been.
Yes.
That's okay. We love cats.
All right, take it away, Holly.
Take it away, Holly. Have fun.
Thank you, Chris and Katie, for not only giving me this opportunity, but as I think Rob was mentioning, providing this gathering place for our community. It really is a wonderful way to keep up with our alumni and also just get our work to an audience that is always loving and supportive and fabulous. So thank you for that. As Chris mentioned in my bio, I got my MFA in creative nonfiction, and that is still primarily what I'm writing. And when I was gathering my pieces for this evening, I realized, because I tend to write in Flash and I tend to write things that don't seem to go together, and then when I was looking at my stuff for this evening, found accidental themes and recurring images, and it turns out that water and waves and things like that keep coming up over and over in my writing. So who knows, maybe someday there will be a collection that's aquatic in some way. But anyway, for this evening, I have 4 flash pieces to read, and the first one is called Broken Bones. A monarch butterfly lands on the azalea bush near the pool. It flaps its wings while I kick my feet, dive down, re-emerge at the shaded end of the backyard, pretending to be a mermaid as I practice opening my eyes underwater. The chlorine burns the insides of my nostrils just enough to send me back to the surface. My uncle, who is outside taking care of the garden, catches a fly between his fingers and walks over to the fish pond to feed the koi. I want to see them swarm the rim of the pond, watch the ripples in the water as they flap for attention. I climb the ladder, dripping both with water and childlike excitement. The water puddling between my feet and the wood below eliminates friction, and I slip. The acacia-colored deck comes toward me in slow motion. I land partially sideways, most of my weight crashing on my right shoulder. I hear the crack, feel the throbbing radiate throughout my body, the pulse of the ache in my ears tonally similar to the swishing of my blood. I don't remember how, but I stand up off the deck and head inside. I cry to my mother about the pain in my chest, the inability to move my arm, that rhythmic jab biting my nerves in consistent intervals. On our drive to the hospital, each crack in the pavement causes a wave of dizziness that threatens to knock me out. I stare out the window, unsure of how she got me out of my wet bathing suit and into dry clothes, or how we put on my seatbelt, but certain that something inside of me is broken. After the X-ray, the technician notes that my collarbone has shattered. Pieces of the bone cross over one another on the backlit display, creating a treasure map. My broken clavicle marking a pirate's paradise. Nothing is buried in my chest except perhaps stray bone shards. Mom and I share a glance, her eyes wide as she listens to the doctor's instructions for how to help me heal. When I run my fingers over my clavicles today, I feel a large lump on the right one where the pieces of bone fuse back together. The left is straight and smooth like molded ivory, the right an uneven arrangement of callus and cartilage. It's not noticeable in photographs or when I wear tank tops in summer, but the bone fibers ache slightly when it's about to rain. In the shower or sitting on the couch, I find myself massaging the area, a twinge of dull pain radiating outward from the pressure of my fingers. I find an article online that says it's very common for a lump to remain on the collarbone after a break. Everlasting evidence of a long-healed wound. I open my eyes and only see the knees of the people around me. I turn my head upward, but the lights in the kitchen are blinding, almost fluorescent. I'm aware that I have a migraine radiating down to my jawbone. The taste of iron fills my mouth, and I cannot speak. I blink, and I am floating through the kitchen, now the dining room, and the living room, where the once distinct television and wall decor dissolve into watercolors in front of me. A voice I recognize squeaks a muffled goodbye. I blink again, and I'm traveling backwards down the orange brick staircase, watching red and blue lights flash rhythmically against the early evening sky. The word ambulance enters my headspace. This time, it's a seizure. I know I have epilepsy, but something of this magnitude has never happened before. I hear voices. Doctors, nurses, my parents discuss new treatment options, an increase in medication, more testing. I feel someone put a cold IV in the crook of my arm. The icy liquid travels through my veins, and I wonder what it would look like on an X-ray. The next day, I'm home somehow. I look in the mirror, take stock of my injuries, the nasty bruise on my chin where it hit the kitchen table on the way to the floor, the chunk bitten out of the side of my tongue like a slab of meat, the subtle ache in my arm from the IV needle. I stare at the person reflected back at me, the gaps in my memory leaving me feeling less than whole. I imagine a mark on my brain, scar tissue on gray matter, a speck of evidence between my frontal and temporal lobes that proves something inside me was once broken. I imagine it sits next to my missing memories, lives with the stolen moments it refuses to return. Things I know are there that I'll never be able to find. I press on my right collarbone until the pain returns, and I imagine the nerve signals that alert me of my pain dancing with the neurons that misfired, spinning in a rhythmic two-step, twirling and twirling to an unlikely harmony. Okay, so that is the first piece. The next one is shorter and a little tonally different, but again, that like imagery of water is recurring. This is a flash nonfiction about the first date I had with my fiance, and it is called Chlorine Kiss. The summer air is hot and damp as the sun disappears behind the faded fence posts in the shadows of the backyard. I revel in the sounds. The hum of the pool filter, the crunching of flip-flops on stones, the splash of an adventurous cannonball as it disturbs the stillness, tiny waves rippling outward, sloshing water into the grass. I sit on the wooden deck and submerge my feet. The buzz of a horsefly in my ear sends tingles down my neck as the cool breeze summons goosebumps up my arms. Behind me, someone asks if I'd like a towel. I turn to wrap myself in the sea turtle linen, fabric softener and chlorine mingling in my nostrils. Paul stands an arm's length away, leaning against the high, glass-topped table. He places the towel around my shoulders, and that action magically obscures the chaotic splashing of night swim volleyball, the raucous laughter of tipsy 20-somethings suddenly light years away. This memory is blurry, as if it occurred in that surreal moment right before waking up, when the light kisses your eyelids and whispers you awake. Suspended as if floating in this infinite twilight, I travel through my memories of this night. At this moment, neither of us know yet, but this will be the first night we kiss under the star-speckled sky. Pale skin washed out by the moonlight, twinkling eyes, soft lips. The first night we will climb into the pickup truck and allow the suburban street outside to fade away. The first night we will watch Silent Hill under blankets while the air conditioner whirs, chilled fingers intertwined, callous thumbs moving in a soothing rhythm. The first night we will dry our hair with fresh towels, the clean chemical scent of chlorine dispersing in the atmosphere, disappearing on the wind like whispers. The first night we will accidentally touch during the game of Marco Polo, share apologies, cheeks pruned and pink, the volleyball net as our witness. The first night we will share soft serve ice cream, chocolate and vanilla waffle cones dipped in sprinkles, sticky and sweet. Coming out of my reverie, I feel the soft caress of the towel against my skin. I stand, water still dripping down my legs and pooling at my feet. The sky is cloudless, the stars peeking out from behind the large tree in the neighbor's yard. Paul adjusts his glasses that slip slightly down his nose from the moisture in the air. He smiles at me, and somehow I know our infinity begins with a chlorine kiss underneath the stars. So that was the second one. Hope I have time for all four. If not, I'll end with the third one. But the third one, Paul makes a reappearance, and it's about a different time that we were together. Not quite as happy, particularly because of something odd that occurred at the beach near my house. But this piece is called Where Lightning Strikes the Sand. A swarm of gnats nibbles on the carcass of a dead fish. Its bones, pin-like and ivory white, poke visibly through the sand, the remaining flesh pale, a ghost reflecting the rays of the sun. The tide is low, and even with the rhythmic sloshing of the waves and chirping seagulls, their buzz unnerves me, my stomach full of knots, like watching a scene from a horror film unfold. As Paul and I move down the shore, we notice another fish, this time just the bones and a head. A pigeon lands near the water, pecking at what remains, enamored with his good fortune, the sand a veritable buffet table. We continue our stroll and feel seasick. The beachfront is littered with corpses, fish scales shimmering like lost coins, rotting eyeballs, clouded, staring outward toward an endless, unreachable horizon. Wishing desperately that I had worn sneakers, we dodge the bodies as we head toward the spot at the end of the sand where the creek feeds into the bay, the perfect spot to skip seashells. Paul is always careful to tell me when there is another corpse, a splintered piece of driftwood, or a shard of broken glass. The soles of my feet sink slightly in the sand, warm and soft. I bend down to grab a flat, white stone. Its smooth, rounded edges are perfect for skipping across the water, out toward the sandbar where seaweed sways gently in the breeze. I bend my wrist like I'm supposed to, but the rock sinks with a violent plop as it disappears into the brackish water. Paul chooses an abandoned clamshell. Perhaps its curve creates the proper aerodynamic shape because it flies across the water, nearly landing in the thick brush of seagrass growing on the other side of the creek. I turn to grab another rock or shell and am faced with more death. A newly washed up fish, this one covered in a thick layer of tiny black flies. Disturbed and a little nauseous, we decide to turn back to go home. Later, when we get there, we will scour the internet for answers to find out that bacteria often found in poorly prepared seafood is wreaking havoc on local waterways. When Paul goes for a walk by the lake near his house, there will be more fish on land than left in the water. When I research these bacteria, I learn that they usually affect people with symptoms that mimic food poisoning, an upset stomach, and a generally unwell feeling. We consider the power of such bacteria something so small with the strength to make us ill without ever entering our bloodstreams. The salty breeze tickles my nose as I feel the sand underneath my feet. I nearly step on a broken piece of a beer bottle left there, perhaps, by a teenager sneaking alcohol with his friends. Paul moves me out of the way, saving us both a trip to the hospital. He adjusts his glasses and wishes that we had instead found sea glass. As if by magic, I notice a small white shard with dulled edges peering out of the sand. I pick it up, brushing the dust off its rounded rectangle form. I hand it to Paul, who smiles. He told me once that sea glass is made when lightning strikes the sand, changing the molecules of each grain to create a tangible item, the cross between scientific and the enchanted. I had always thought that sea glass was formed as a result of pollution, nature's way of creating something beautiful from its pain. We leave the beach, brush the sand from our bodies, let the breeze knot our hair and sun kiss our skin. The piece of sea glass sits on my dresser, origins unknown. I wonder if it is a piece of a secret bottle of booze left there by a group of teenagers hiding in the reeds, smoking homemade joints, taking solace in the sound of the waves as they vomit on the sand. Instead, I like to imagine electrical storms, dark clouds swirling over the water, a strike on the sand, shards scattering across the beach, evidence of the supernatural like hidden treasures for us to find. Okay, and then it looks like we have time for the last one. Maybe? No? Okay.
Holly, how many minutes would you say it is?
We don't need to do it. It's cool.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is so hard, Chris. Oh, Chris.
Go ahead and read.
Go for it, Holly.
Okay, this one is just called Water. And it is a piece I wrote using one sentence as the structure, and it was picked up by Complete Sentence Lit. So if you want to read it later, you can go look at it there. Okay. The day after the hurricane, after salty bay water licked at my ankles, after Mother Earth's tears drowned the town, her fists against the pavement in an argument with the moon, whose own fury gripped and yanked at the waves, the tide's destruction ebbing and flowing in detrimental harmony. After the rushing and splashing outside the darkened windows, eerily audible in a galaxy of black dotted with spectral stars. After the empty shells of houses stood at attention, soldiers that survived the war. After I returned home, beaten by the scent of low tide, of decaying horseshoe crabs, of wet sand, of old fish and mildewing driftwood. After the salt burned my eyes, the air acidic and aggressive. After the silence was unsettling, the subdued whoosh of waves a distant whisper. After I noticed that the waterline was taller than I am. After the Parmesan cheese drifted behind the couch, the eggs floated into the dryer, the milk broke open in the bathtub. After I pushed open the swollen wooden door to my bedroom, after I knelt on damp carpet, moisture seeping through my pants, numbing my knees, after I clutched waterlogged copies of paperback books, their pages disintegrating like damp sand between my fingers. After the ink ran down the pages that remained, eyeliner met with salty tears. After their words escaped and floated away, a droplet of hope in a deep, endless ocean. After the sun shone high in the sky, a welcomed warming presence in the crisp October air. After the weeping and the screaming, was the only day that loving the water felt like a mistake. Thank you. We did it. Woo!
Oh,
yeah.
Gorgeous. Just gorgeous. I'm so glad you got that last one.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was pretty short too, but it was a beautiful way to bring it to a close.
Absolutely. And we're all catching that water theme, Holly.
Yeah,
And yes, that's
Holly,
like
I'm amazed.
simple, but like that's in you, you know, it's accidental, but it's not accidental, you know.
Right. Well, isn't it so interesting that you only recently discovered that? Because, you know, I mean, you mention it, and of course we see it all over the place, right? And then you didn't notice that for so long. This is so interesting. What do you think?
Even even the
I mean,
rhythm of the phrases
yeah,
and kind of the how lyrical it is, while and very poetic while being prose, where, you know, we're always mentioning Charles Rafferty on here, talking about like, I don't see that line, you know, what is the line between, you know, between the two. Just absolutely gorgeous work, and very emotional and very vivid. I'm really in these scenes, I'm really feeling them. And, you know, of course, I'm like a big sucker for the romance. I really love the Chlorine Kiss.
Thank you.
But I really enjoyed all of them. So beautiful. And just you feel that kind of very like gentle but very powerful rhythm. It has a kind of,
yeah.
it has an ocean feel, even if you didn't like necessarily mention water. But Chris, let's ask her a question while we still have her.
Well, you know, these are flash nonfiction, which seems to be all the rage now. I don't know where that. It's just like all over. I woke up one day and it was all over the place, and
Because it's
I
awesome.
mean, it's such a great way to write, you know, what are essentially memoir type pieces in, you know, in a short form. Do you have, obviously you're working towards a collection here, you must be, and we all see it. So there's that. And then do you have ambitions to write, you know, longer nonfiction pieces, or is there something about the short ones that just works for you?
I just seem to keep coming back to Flash. Like, no matter what I try, it comes out in 1,000 words or less, and I don't know like why that keeps happening to me.
It's like very publishable in literary journals. I mean, that's like,
Oh yeah,
perfect, right?
Yeah, it's good news. Someday I do hope to write like a full memoir. That the first piece I read deals a little bit with my, you know, growing up with epilepsy as a child, and I want to write that book someday. But I am currently just in the Flash zone at the moment.
Well,
that's
I
great.
love
It's
the
working.
Flash zone. Holly, are you do you see these, my assumption is you're seeing these as a collection, and how many percent of the way towards getting this into a book that's in our hands? How close are you to like the manuscript is done? Because we want these in a book, Holly. We want to have them on our shelf.
Thank you. Yeah, I was kind of it was kind of like an accidental theme that happened. So
Yeah.
I would say probably like we're like 20% of the way, if anything, because it's recent.
I see.
But perhaps someday, I hope.
There's
Have
no
you ever
perhaps here. There's no perhaps. It's going to happen.
have you ever thought about going in the memoir in verse direction? I mean, we're having a lot of kind of a bit of a crossover here between what Rob is doing and what you're doing in a way, maybe like a little chapbook length sort of thing. I don't know if you would want to do that, but
No, it's definitely something I've thought about. I just don't know. I'm very disorganized, and quite frankly, I write in Flash, I think, because I'm like, okay, I can do it and it's done, and then I'm moving on to the next thing. So putting together a collection that is, you know, that does have a through line is going to be a challenge for me, but it's a challenge I'm willing to accept.
well, you know what? You know, Holly, one thing that we're always kind of saying on our stream is like the end goal doesn't necessarily have to be like a book length manuscript. I mean, we love that. We love it. But you know, having these incredible pieces, publishing these, sharing these, reading these, and just, you know, as the spirit moves, you know, just creating these incredible pieces and sharing them, you know, as you do, taking that time. I mean, that is just as worthy, and we would love to have you back.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Holly, for being with
Great
us.
stuff. Thank you.
So good. Chris, so we have had 2 amazing readers already. So hard to stick to our little time limit here. But we have 2 more amazing readers to come. I'm also on this side of the screen, which feels weird. So we'll need to fix
Okay,
that.
well, we'll fix that
Yes.
maybe on the other side. Okay, let's.
But we need to welcome
Michael.
Dunaway. Hey, Michael.
There he is.
Hey guys.
So good to see you.
I was saying earlier, it's beard night, everybody out there.
It's look at these beautiful beards over here. Are they not? They're not. Michael, I'm wondering about what your beard care routine is.
So Chris was asking earlier. I do use a beard balm. I use it's called the Naked Prince.
Oh,
wow.
Naked
that's
Prince.
what's fancy.
Chris, for people like you and me, it's very important to find a beard balm that doesn't have a tint that is either clear or white.
That's so true.
As you may have discovered, it does actually dye your beard the color of.
I've discovered that with the chlorine. I will, in certain light, I appear a tad greenish down here. What are you gonna do?
You guys can share notes, but Michael, we need to introduce you. Let me read your bio here. Michael Dunaway is editor-at-large at Paste Magazine, creative director at the Rome International Film Fest in Georgia, a New York Times Critics' Pick winning filmmaker, and the lead singer of the Black Rattlers. Michael, I have so many questions. I can only imagine you have a million amazing stories to share with us. The last line of his bio says this, which cracks me up. He swears to God that in 2022, he'll finish his novel, Bob Dylan Slept Here. We're excited for this novel, Michael.
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, we're excited to hear you read.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. I'm not sure. I'm going to keep an eye on the time. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to read still, but I know I want to read you this one. This one, actually, it looked like I was going to get this published in the Paris Review. I was very excited, and then the last minute it didn't happen. So, but you get to have it instead for now. The great filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich, who passed away this week, was a friend and mentor of mine. I actually did read a remembrance of him for Paste magazine, and I may read that later, depending on time. But in the meantime, this one is as of yet unpublished. We'll see tomorrow what kind of emails back I get from some editors. And if anybody has an idea of a journal that you think would enjoy this, please let me know. So this is called 5 Lessons Peter Bogdanovich Taught Me About Art and Life. Peter Bogdanovich passed away this week of natural causes. He was one of the great American directors, of course. His 3-picture run of The Last Picture Show, What's Up, Doc, and Paper Moon has seldom been equaled. And although his work after that, without his brilliant collaborator Polly Platt, was uneven, it contained some great work unjustly overlooked by critics and fans who adopted an easy narrative about his decline. He was a genius. He never stopped being a genius. That's evident not only in his films, but also in his criticism, his interviews, his documentaries, and his curation. He was also my friend. We met at a film festival and immediately hit it off. His multi-hyphenate career lined up nearly exactly with what I was trying to do myself, and I think he got a real kick out of my seeing myself as following in his footsteps. Our friendship deepened when his daughter Antonia, my friend and collaborator, asked him to play a small role in my scripted directorial debut, 6 LA Love Stories. From that point on, whenever I was in Los Angeles, I'd visit him, and we'd have the kind of conversations most film buffs can only dream of having with a legendary director. Peter and I weren't intimates by any measure, but he was my friend and mentor, and I loved him. I'd be honored to share a few of the lessons he taught me about filmmaking and about life. 1, humility and collegiality. Peter was well known for having a massive ego and for never being shy about telling people when their ideas were foolish, but I never, ever saw that side of him. Perhaps he had mellowed with age, or perhaps I passed his internal test of someone whom he could take seriously, or perhaps he just saw me as too much of a sweet puppy dog personality to hurt. But from about 2 minutes into our very first conversation, once I had crossed some mysterious threshold, Peter Bogdanovich treated me as a real colleague, and not even as a junior colleague. He spoke to me as a filmmaker and critic at his level, which I was not, of course, and likely never will be. But the point is, he treated me that way. I'd say that his humility and collegiality and warmth were the heart of our friendship, in fact. I'm not at all convinced that any of my ideas actually helped him in his work. At most, perhaps my perspective may have prompted him down alleyways of his own that he wasn't exploring yet. But there's something to be said for approaching one's friendships with that level of equanimity, maybe especially when your reputation is for the opposite. 2, less is more. Less is more is such a cliche when it's tossed off lightly, but for Peter, it was a real aesthetic. Take his use of black and white in so many of his great films, for instance. It's difficult and a little painful to even imagine The Last Picture Show in color, to take one example. Peter loved to tell about how he called his old friend Orson Welles to tell him he had been greenlit to make that film. Welles said, "Well, I certainly hope you're going to make it in black and white." Peter asked him why, and the great man bellowed back, "Because black and white is the actor's medium. There's never been a great performance in color. I defy you to show me one." The only thing better than hearing Welles himself was hearing Peter imitate him. Peter took Welles' advice, of course, to his and all of our immeasurable benefit. I asked him once what he loved about black and white cinematography, and he said, "Orson was right. It brings out the actors' performances. Color is so distracting. It's too loud. Sometimes, in order to say the most important thing you're trying to say, you need to stop saying so many other things too." 3, respecting your elders. That Peter called Welles to tell him the news about The Last Picture Show was no coincidence. The great Orson Welles was Peter's close personal friend and a sort of father figure to him. He was also friends with Alfred Hitchcock and John Ford and Howard Hawks, Mount Rushmore-sized giants. Those were his intimates. Understand, his new Hollywood contemporaries were directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, William Friedkin. He knew them too, but he'd really light up when he talked about the old guard. It was to them that he truly looked for inspiration and for approval. We've recently had a much-needed reckoning with the behaviors and attitudes and beliefs of many long-admired figures from the past. Those issues are beyond the scope of this little remembrance. But as a source of artistic inspiration alone, it's difficult to imagine better places a young filmmaker could turn than to Welles, Hitchcock, Ford, and Hawks. Peter was fully aware of those men's foibles, some of which foibles he shared himself, but he knew enough to learn at the feet of the masters. 4, promoting others. By nature, many great artists tend to be of the lone wolf persuasion. Sometimes they're so dogged in their pursuit of their vision that they don't have the time or emotional energy to even become heavily invested in the work of others, much less work to promote it. Filmmakers especially tend to this model because, unlike artists in many other fields, they're also rallying hundreds of collaborators around their vision for each project. It's not a moral failing, this heightened self-focus. It's often a necessity. Peter was different, though, partly because those great filmmakers of the past had become his friends, and partly because it was just the way his mind worked. He wrote astute film criticism, wrote books of interviews, organized archival screening programs, and even made documentary films championing them. So much so that it could be argued that he himself helped form our opinion of those artists. Among major American directors, only Martin Scorsese even approaches Peter as a champion of other filmmakers' work. So he made a difference out in the world in our appreciation for those filmmakers. But how could that immersion in the work of past masters have not also guided his own creative vision, his own vision of life, for that matter? I know I was partly inspired by Peter when I began my own documentary about Richard Linklater, and I can tell you firsthand that I have been fundamentally shaped as an artist and a person by my deep dive into Linklater's masterpieces. I could say the same about my career directing film festivals or about my teaching. Considering, exploring, and championing the work of others, it turns out, is fundamentally formational. And 5, listening to the accidents. I've saved the shortest and most mysterious for last. I was telling Peter about a problem we'd run into shooting a scene in 6 LA Love Stories, and how in fixing it, we actually ended up with a much stronger scene than we otherwise would have. If you approach it with an open mind, this is why directing can be the most inspiring and humbling job in the world. Peter got that little sly half smile on his face and told me, Michael, you always have to listen to the accidents. They may be the picture telling you what it wants to be. I was stunned at that moment, and I'm stunned even now in recounting the story. What a beautiful bit of wisdom from a man who had been there and experienced it, and not a man prone to talking in mystical terms for that matter. But Peter was like that. Every time you thought you had him figured out, he'd surprise you with something new. Neither I nor any of us can learn from him face to face now, but there are treasures yet to be mined from the ocean of ink and the bins of celluloid that he left behind. I know I'll be grabbing my pick and heading down to that mine regularly in the years to come. All right. I had a special request for to make sure that I read some of Bob Dylan Slept here. You know what? First, I think I'm gonna do the second Bogdanovich piece first, even though it's available at pastemagazine.com. I'm gonna go ahead and, it's short. I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out of the way. It's called The Peter Bogdanovich I Knew. It's not always a wise choice to meet your idols, especially when they have a reputation for not suffering fools gladly, as Peter Bogdanovich most certainly did. So I'm sure my hands were literally trembling when I went over to introduce myself to him on a warm Sarasota evening. It was the closing night gala of the Sarasota Film Festival. Tom Hall had invited me as a juror, thank God, and Peter as a special guest. We stood for at least an hour at opposite ends of the VIP section in our respective spring suits and ties, sipping champagne and looking up at the Florida stars, before I eventually found the courage to cross over to him. If it all sounds like the beginning of a Hollywood rom-com, that's actually not far off from how it felt, at least to me, and trust me, Peter would have loved that anyway. He was especially passionate about romantic films. My greatest hero is my father. His favorite film of all time is The Last Picture Show, so the Bogdanovich name was sacred to me from an early age. My admiration only grew as I explored his other films, What's Up, Doc?, Paper Moon. Hell, I even loved the ones that critics sniffed at, like Daisy Miller. And once I discovered his writing, well, then I positively swooned over Peter Bogdanovich. So that night under the Florida stars, I mustered up my best confident face, walked over and said, everything I'm trying to do in my career, Peter Bogdanovich already did bigger and better. It was one of my stock lines, even before I ever met the great man. Peter was a critic, an interviewer, a curator, and a filmmaker. Exactly the 4 roles I play in my own much more modest film life. To my great relief, he laughed slyly. We hit it off immediately. We started talking about classic films, and his face lit up. I asked what he was working on currently, and he told me about a new project he was putting together, She's Funny That Way, which he did end up making, which I found delightful. He asked me about my own filmmaking. He asked me what I thought of the film he was acting in that was playing the festival, Cold Turkey, and really listened and considered my answers. I loved it, especially the performances by Peter and the wonderful Alicia Witt. In fact, from early in that initial conversation, once he had satisfied himself that I knew what I was talking about, he treated me not as a fan, but as a true colleague. From that day forward, for the rest of our friendship. This was heady stuff for a young filmmaker. Imagine Toni Morrison asking how you developed the characters in your novel, or Keith Richards sitting down to compare blues licks with you. That's what it felt like. But that might not even fully capture what the experience of knowing Peter was like, because in addition to being a legend himself, he had an encyclopedic knowledge of, appreciation for, and insight on all the great American filmmakers. Many of those great filmmakers were his friends. He came up as one of the new Hollywood directors of the 1970s, of course. Coppola and Scorsese and De Palma and Spielberg and Lucas and Cimino and Friedkin and the rest were his contemporaries. But his closest friends in the industry stretched back well before his time. Wells and Hitchcock and Ford and Hawks, among others. Those were the giants he drank with, learned from, argued with, wrote about. He was our last direct link to that era. In the years to come, whenever I was in Los Angeles, I'd visit Peter and have the kind of conversations most film buffs can only dream of having. I think he always got a kick out of our symmetry. He was constantly looking back to filmmakers 2 generations older, and now here I was looking back nearly 2 generations to him. Peter was a master storyteller verbally as well as cinematically, and he was a great mimic too. It truly was like being in the very room with Orson or Hitch or whomever he was channeling. Sometimes he'd tell me stories I'd read before in his books. Sometimes he'd tell me stories he told me before. I never, ever stopped him. How could I? One of his favorite stories to tell involved a lunch with his friend Jimmy Stewart. A man approached the table and briefly told Stewart about how much his career had meant to him, and specifically about one favorite scene in which Stewart had played a key role. After the man left, a 1,000-yard stare crossed Stewart's face, and he said to Peter, "You see, we give people these little pieces of time, and they keep them forever." At least that's how the story appears in Peter's book. That book is even entitled Pieces of Time. But every time I heard him tell the story in person, he wouldn't say pieces of time. Whether he was misremembering or had corrected his memory or, who knows, had long since exercised a screenwriter's prerogative to punch up a line, he'd say jewels of time instead. I love that little phrase, jewels of time. Peter gave me a jeweler's case worth of those in the time I knew him, through his stories and reminiscences and his insights, and perhaps most of all through his championing of me and my vision as a critic and filmmaker. He even graciously agreed to appear in 6 LA Love Stories, my scripted feature directorial debut produced by his daughter Antonia, my friend and collaborator and a hell of a filmmaker herself. He was spot perfect in his role, of course. And when he told me he loved our film, and those that know Peter know he would rather stab himself in the eye than give an insincere compliment, it's not an exaggeration to say that it was a seminal moment in my life. I don't want to exaggerate how well I knew Peter. Others knew him much better, and of course most never had the chance to meet him in person. But I do know this, in his articles, his books, his interviews, his documentaries, and in his transcendent films, he left us all a treasury of those jewels of time. May we keep them forever. So I don't know, I thought it might be kind of interesting to hear kind of 2 different takes on, there's certainly overlapping material in there, but I kind of felt like I needed to write both those versions of that, if that makes sense.
Michael, they're absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful. Do I have time to read something short from Bob Dylan Slept Here, or do I need to?
Oh, we love Bob Dylan Slept Here, but I don't know, Chris. I don't think we. Oh my God, we're gonna have to bring you back. We're gonna have to bring you back.
Totally cool. Totally cool.
Or maybe like 2 minutes. We can give you 2.
I can give 2 minutes. Give me 1 second.
Okay, give him 2 minutes, Chris. Give me 2 minutes.
Maybe 3.
You guys gotta stay up late with us. We still have to read.
I know exactly what I can read. This is not new, but this was the first. The first bit of the novel that I ever wrote, and I wrote it in a. What is going on? Sorry. I wrote it in a workshop, a Fumfa workshop. And it is right. I'm getting there. I know I'm spending part of my 3 minutes right here trying to find it. But it is very short. All right. Nope, that's not it. Crap. Come on. Right here.
I'm just going to gush about your other 2 pieces while you're
please.
finding Bob Dylan. So you just let me know when I should stop gushing.
Okay.
It's not just gorgeous remembrance pieces, and also like what a treat to like kind of look over your shoulder in your amazing filmmaker life experiences, Michael. What a treasure.
I'm burnt. My beard, not only my beard, the rest of me is green with envy that you Peter Bogdanovich I was very saddened to hear of his passing, and I'm like your father. You know, whenever I think people ask me what's your favorite movie, it kind of depends, but very often, The Last Picture Show jumps right to the top in my mind. It's the most beautiful movie.
Okay, I've got the thing. Thank you so much for saying that. So I wrote this in a workshop in the one of the Fairfield residencies, and Austin just kind of showed up. This was not autobiographical, at least not directly. And Austin's voice is not exactly my voice. We have a lot in common, but he just kind of showed up and started talking to me, and so I just kind of. He dictated it to me. And so this is very short. I get up just before dawn once the semis fire up those god-awful diesel engines and start chugging out of the parking lot, rumbling low and mean. I mean, I could always just close the windows those few inches that they even open up in this roadside flea bag, try to drift off again. But these days, once I'm up, I'm pretty much up. That deep, peaceful sleep of youth, damned if she isn't an elusive as hell mistress now. So I get up. I'm just 3.5 steps from the open alcove with the recessed sink and mirror. Imogen's turned my way on the other bed, so I don't turn on the light, but there's some ambience sneaking in from the blinking neon occupancy sign outside the window. So I stumble over to the sink, let the water run cold, and on a lark, reach down and splash some on my face. Never really done that to start the day, but it looks good on TV, so I give it a try. Not bad, I guess. Not quite as delirious as how the actors make it look, but what is? In the faint strobe of the red light, on, off, I lean in to get a better look at this old mug of mine, and goddamned if I don't look more 60 than 50. And a hard 60 at that. We're talking road miles. There are lines there that not that many years ago were considered character building and romantic and truth to tell kind of hot, as I was told more times than once, doubtless in widely varying degrees of sincerity. Now those little wise creases have somehow worn their way into deep, jagged crevices, a landscape as barren and unforgiving as the New Mexico desert on the long drive from Texas to LA in August. And not nearly as photo-friendly, I'm pretty goddamn sure.
Michael, you cracked me up. That was too good. I like
you wrote that in a workshop?
I did. I mean, obviously, I've revised since.
Yeah. Whose workshop was it?
It was. I actually don't remember. I don't remember whose workshop it was actually, but it was a mirror. That was the only prop. Right, something about a mirror.
That's great.
So cool.
That was the beginning of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
With this
So
novel.
that's the one that I ever had for a class. So that's why I'm having a hard time pulling who it was.
Well, Michael, you just like rocked our world along with Rob and Holly. Thank you so much for your readings tonight. I mean, it was just incredible to hear your stories about Rob and your remembrances, and to kind of be in these different places, like kind of with you, listening to these experiences. And also always so good to hear from Bob Dylan Slept Here. And you got to see in the comments, we're all waiting. We're very excited. We need Bob Dylan Slept Here.
2022.
This is the year.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Michael.
It was Rachel Bash. Someone just told me.
Okay.
It was Rachel Bash's workshop.
Well, you know what, Michael? We're just going to have to bring you back another day because we want to hear more. Everybody tonight, we're having such a great time, and we need to give you more time another day as well. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks,
y'all.
Take care.
Incredible stuff. Well, we are definitely going to go a little late tonight, so everybody has to stick with us, all right? Stay up a little bit later. You know, we're going to go maybe about 10 minutes or so over. We need to welcome Marie Mitchell. Hey, Marie.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
So good. You know, it's just so great to see our colleagues and fellow alums. It's great to see you. So great to hear from all of you. And it just goes to show, like, there's just so much incredible work to share. Each one of these writers is absolutely amazing. Chris, isn't it just wonderful?
It's
wonderful.
fantastic, and it's not over.
And it's not over. Marie, we're so happy to welcome you tonight. And we're so happy you were able to be with us on our holiday night show. We're having like bookends here in the end of the previous year and the beginning of the new year. So thank you so much. Chris, can you do the honor of reading Marie's bio?
Yes, Marie's an award-winning newspaper journalist and photographer who was also published in business journals. Her master's thesis at Fairfield University, Fumfa, is a collection of essays that she is working to get published, and she also is writing poetry. Her specific areas of interest are nature and spirituality. Are we going to get some poems tonight?
We are.
Really love the ones you shared for holiday night, the biblical characters. Awesome.
That makes Kate very happy.
I love that.
Take it away.
Well, to echo Rob and Holly, I really appreciate this opportunity. You know, I'd never be able to hear what they're working on, what Michael's working on, the other people that you have on this every week. So I so appreciate the opportunity, not only to share my work, but to hear what everyone else is working on. I know we're running a little bit late, so I was going to share a piece of flash fiction. I do occasionally dabble in fiction, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip that.
Marie, take your full time. We're going to stay up a little late, so take your full time. Do what you were planning to do.
Well, thank you. All right, then I will, just because the other things that I'm going to share are going to be a little bit intense, and this one is more fun. It's titled The House That Jack Built. I never would have bought the house if I'd known that she'd hate it. I thought she'd love it. I mean, doesn't every princess want her own castle? Okay, so it was a house, not a castle, but still. I hired the best in the tri-state area to build it. Told some woman with too much makeup how to decorate it in my princess's favorite colors. It was more than I could afford, and I worked all kinds of extra hours to pay for the damn thing. I wanted it to be a surprise, so I didn't tell her what was up. All she knew was whenever she spent the weekend, I kept falling asleep, which made her mad. I figured she'd understand once she saw the house. Finally, the day came. The house was huge. It wouldn't fit in my truck. I had to rent a trailer to haul it to my ex's. She had pink and white balloons tied to the mailbox, a white banner with pink letters, "Happy Birthday, Shelby," hung across the garage. Cars filled the driveway and lined the front of the house, so I had to park down the street a ways. I was late, which set Nancy off. She answered the door with a pinched mouth, the blue eyes I'd fallen in love with squinting in the way I'd learned to hate. "Jack, you were supposed to be here before any of the guests arrived," she hissed, like anybody could have heard her if she talked normal, the way the kids were screaming in the backyard. "Accident on the freeway," I said. Car doors slammed. A mom with long tanned legs and a kid carrying a present with a bow as big as his head came up the walk. Nancy's smile popped on. You'd never know from looking that she was pissed off. "Hi, Dana. Hi, John. Just put the present there on the table with the rest. Shelby and the others are in the backyard. Through there." She waved to the sliding glass door behind her. "You're sure it's okay if I just drop John? Phil's out of town and I've got to get Emma to her ballet lesson, and then she's got an orthodontist appointment." Dana looked me over. After the divorce, Nancy moved out of Shelby's old school district. I hardly knew any of her new friends and none of their parents. Nancy didn't introduce me, like it would kill her to admit that I was Shelby's dad. "It's no problem. Sorry you're going to miss the fun." "I know, but I'll be back by 3. That's when you're serving the cake, right?" Dana waved and was off. Nancy squinted at me. "So, where's this special present you got Shelby?" I pointed to the trailer down the street. The dollhouse was visible even from the doorway. Nancy stared. It's big." "Yeah, look, I'm sorry I'm late. There was an accident, like I said. If you'll let me give Shelby her present, I'll get out of here." Just then, Shelby came through the sliding door. She wore a gold crown and a pink dress with a frilly skirt. A curly-haired girl was with her. "Daddy!" Shelby ran to jump into my arms. I swung her around. "Daddy, you came for my party!" "He's just dropping off your present," Nancy said. You got me a present? Where is it? Outside. Come on, princess. Let's go get it. I took Shelby's hand and led her to the trailer, followed by John, the curly-haired girl, and Nancy, who said over her shoulder, Cleo, could you watch things for a sec? We'll be right back. At the trailer, Shelby's eyes got wide. Wow, Daddy, a dollhouse? Which made me feel like $1 million until the curly-haired girl said, that's an ugly color. Shelby turned red. You still playing with dolls? John laughed. So did Curly Hair. Shelby burst into tears. Daddy, how could you give me such a stupid present? She whirled and ran. You just ruined your daughter's birthday. Nancy went after Shelby, calling her name. Curly Hair looked at the dollhouse. Mine's from American Girl, she said. Emma! John! A thin woman in green stood on Nancy's lawn, motioning to them. Race you, John said, and they were off. I broke my fist punching a hole in the house. The doctor's bill will take me a year to pay off, not to mention the fine from the cops for setting the damn thing on fire. Next year, I'll just give the kid a ticket to Disneyland. I hear they treat princesses right. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears now. And as Katie mentioned, I'm working on a collection of poetry that's told from the viewpoint of different people mentioned in the New Testament. And these 3 poems, they're linked. They're all about John the Baptist, who was a preacher who was sent to prepare the way for Jesus Christ. John preached repentance and baptized people in the Jordan River. He was very popular. Crowds went out to see him. This is the first poem, On Jordan's Bank. Jasmine scented the air as we set out, curious and eager off across the desert, most of the town. Home stayed the infirm, haunting us with jealous gazes. Nestled in their nurses' arms, the infants nodded uncaring. The throngs jostling along the river say he is Elijah reborn. Hoping to procure salvation when he took his place, every mouth fell silent, all eyes sought his face. Brood of vipers, he called us, words to batter our souls, ardent, potent preaching to bring us to repentance, pushing us to care for those in need. I saw tax collectors turning from greed, soldiers from corruption. Into the water we all went, burning with his exhortations, seeking cleansing of our sins, conversion of our ways, tempted to take him as the Christ, though he denies it. You couldn't hear from hearing that poem, but it's acrostic. The first letter of each line spells out John the Baptist. So the background for this next poem is that John was arrested and imprisoned by the king because John told him that it was unlawful for him to marry his brother's wife. Herodias, the king's wife, held a grudge against John because of this, but the king actually liked to listen to the prophet and kept him safe. Then came the king's birthday, when Herodias' daughter danced for the king, and he was so pleased that he offered her anything she wished, up to half his kingdom. What happened next is told in the poem. Herodias' daughter. My mother loved me, or so I thought, when the king promised any gift I would claim as the bright future my dance had wrought. My mind with anxiety was fraught. I was too young to know what prize to name, and my mother loved me, or so I thought. She smiled when her advice I sought, never dreaming she considered me a pawn in her game to exploit the bright future my dance had wrought. She bid me have the prophet's head on a platter brought, said the king would be even more pleased when it came. I obeyed because my mother loved me, or so I thought. At my request, the king recoiled. He was distraught, but she won the gambit, his oath he wouldn't disclaim. My mother didn't love me as I had thought. She obliterated the bright future my dance had wrought. That was a V&L. And the third poem in this series is told from the voice of John the Baptist just before he's beheaded. A little bit more background might help. John had baptized Jesus Christ, and when Jesus came up out of the water, a voice from the heavens said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." The other thing that's important to know is that the Jews of the time actually expected the Messiah to come as a king who would drive the Romans out of Israel and return rule of the country to the Jews. John the Baptist. On Jordan's bank, I had such hopes when the sky opened and the voice spoke, but there followed no rousing cry to rally the people against the Romans. So I wondered and waited and finally sent word. My disciples returned to say, "He makes the blind see, the lame walk, the deaf hear. He cleanses lepers, raises the dead, preaches to the poor. It seems he came not a king to conquer, but to restore righteousness. The jailer's footsteps approach. I do not look for the coming of another." So I'm going to switch. As my biography said, I really enjoy writing about nature. And as those of you who went through the residencies with me know, I'm a bird watcher. I actually wrote a rough draft of this next essay for my thesis, and I've been working on it, trying to get it into a form that's publishable. In praise of pigeons. A mourning dove cries outside my window, boo, hoo, hoo, over and over, 3 times, 7 times, a dozen times without pause. A mating call, but it reminds me of a story I once heard. The dove weeps, the story goes, because long ago one of its kind landed on the cross of Christ as he was crucified. Stricken by the death of the innocent Son of God, the dove vented its sorrow, now memorialized in the voice of this gentle gray bird. In Hebrew scriptures, the dove symbolizes hope. Noah, waiting in the ark for the flood to recede, sent forth a dove, which came back carrying an olive leaf as evidence that the water had receded. The dove figures in other ancient religions as well, representing the Mesopotamian deity Inanna Ishtar, the Canaanite mother goddess Asherah, and Aphrodite of the Greek pantheon. Some people think that doves are distinctly different from pigeons, but science doesn't differentiate between the two. In fact, the bird most of us know as a pigeon properly is called a rock dove, one of the 300 species composing the family Columbidae. The laughing dove, the squatter pigeon, the zebra dove, the metallic pigeon, the pallid dove, the Nicobar pigeon, all of these and their scores of cousins are found everywhere on Earth except the Sahara Desert, the Antarctica, and the Arctic. Similar to the dove in Judeo-Christianity, the pigeon holds a respected place in Islam. Muslims believe that a pair of these birds laid eggs outside the cave of Thawr, where Muhammad was hiding from his enemies. Seeing the nest, as well as a spider web at the entrance, those who sought the prophet's life assumed the cave was empty because no one could have entered it without disturbing the nest and the web. They went their way, allowing Muhammad and his companion to safely continue their journey to Medina. In a secular sense, the dove is emblematic of peace, not least because of Pablo Picasso's famous blue line drawing titled Colombe de la Paix, Dove of Peace. One version of this image, a bird carrying a green sprig in its beak, was displayed at the inaugural International Peace Conference held in 1949. Noah's bird probably wasn't a mourning dove. The bird Picasso used as the model for his original painting certainly wasn't. Snow white, somewhat stout with feathered feet, possibly was an Indian fantail pigeon, a fancy breed cultivated by pigeon aficionados. The bird itself was given to Picasso by his fellow artist, Henri Matisse, who had kept birds in his old age until he emptied his apartment in the late 1940s so that he could concentrate on one of his last commissions, the Chapel of Venice. Unlike the bird Matisse gave Picasso, the wild mourning dove is slender and gray with black spotted wings and pale peach undersides. It ranges across the United States, east to Cuba and south through Mexico into a large portion of Central America. When the pigeon was domesticated in the Middle East 10,000 years ago, it offered a rare source of year-round fresh meat, and its guano was valued as fertilizer. Centuries later, passenger pigeons were considered cheap food in the United States. Millions flew over North America. It was said one flock could take hours to pass over a spot, and the sound of their wings made normal conversation impossible. But they were hunted so ruthlessly that by the turn of the 20th century, they had disappeared from the wild, a frequently cited example of human-caused extinction. The last of the species, a female named Martha, died in 1914 at the Cincinnati Zoo. 50 years earlier, Charles Darwin was raising pigeons at his country home near London. His study of the various man-made breeds aided development of his theory of evolution, and in fact, one of his friends recommended that he write a book about pigeons rather than one for which he became renowned, On the Origin of Species. But at that time in Victorian England, pigeon raising was all the rage, and Darwin's friend told him that a book about them would be, quote, be reviewed in every journal in the kingdom and soon be on every table, close quote. If the pigeon family has royalty, the homing pigeon probably wears the crown. This species, descended from the wild rock dove, is known for its ability to return to its cote even if released 1,000 miles away. Genghis Khan is said to have used these birds as messengers with his troops as he conquered Asia and Eastern Europe. The ancient Romans used them to deliver news about chariot races, and in more recent years, they've been used to fly cocaine over prison walls. One famous homer, Cher Ami, was credited with saving the lives of almost 200 American soldiers during the First World War. Flying through a flurry of German bullets, Cher Ami lost an eye and a leg, but still managed to travel 25 miles to deliver the call for help tied to his left leg. His body, like that of Martha the passenger pigeon, is preserved at the Smithsonian Institution. Despite this honorable history, modern city officials tend to view pigeons as detested denizens of their burgs. They are the rats with rings in the 1980 Woody Allen film Stardust Memories, although the term apparently was coined in 1966 by a New York Parks Commissioner. One reason for the species' unpopularity is that every year, each bird produces 25 pounds of poop acidic enough to eat away limestone and capable of carrying diseases such as histoplasmosis, cryptococcosis, and psittacosis. It's not against any religion to want to dispose of a pigeon, claims the narrator of the pop song Poisoning Pigeons in the Park, and these birds frequently have been subjected to scientific experimentation. In one infamous experiment, the noted behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner tried to train pigeons to guide missiles for the military. Although the pigeon's accuracy was nearly perfect in the preliminary tests, the military canceled them. Skinner said the problem was that, quote, no one would take us seriously. As a child, I too wanted to cage fancy pigeon breeds, not to experiment upon, but to possess for their beauty. Today, I am content to admire the iridescent feathers of the strutting street pigeons and hearken to the whistling wings of the mourning dove as she takes flight. I watch, listen, and wonder that this creature is simultaneously a symbol of deities and dirtiness, a harbinger of peace and also a hero of war, a prime example of evolution as well as extinction, but despite all this, remains just a pigeon. Right, and then I have 3 very, very short poems to close with, and they also are about nature. The first poem is about the Great Awk, which is an extinct species that looked a little bit like a penguin. It went extinct in the 1850s also because of hunting. Scientists at the time realized it was in danger and they passed some conservation laws, but that didn't help. And today the only thing that's left of the specimens are in museums and private collections. Great Awk Elegy. Bones, feathers, eggs we preserve for posterity, but we slaughtered the species, last of an ancient genus, though we tried to preserve it. hatching a morality tale that has yet to be heeded. And 2 years ago, Fairfield University had a display of art that dealt with birds of the area. One of the artists was James Reed, who often in his work depicts crows and ravens. And this is my response to his paintings. On James Reed's lithographs, why portray the night-toned crow? The artist's palette is more suited to the Halloween-hued oriole or the iridescent starling. If you must be monochromatic, choose the flamingo in fuchsia, the cardinal in scarlet, the swan in bridal white. If you insist on a bird in ebony, take the one with red-slashed wings or the condor, king-sized extinction cheater. But your ink accents the crow and his cousin raven, one the Morrigan's battle shape, the other Odin's messenger, birds of omen and prophecy. You betray their beauty. And I'm going to close with the poem that I wrote after one of my nature walks. The rustle in the sagebrush could be sparrow or cottontail or rattlesnake. Can't tell, with no sign of feather or fur or slithering scale. All I know is there's more here than me and my philosophy.
Absolutely gorgeous, Marie.
Wow, the variety.
Yes, Chris. On holiday night we got to hear some of the poems from the perspective of these biblical characters, and they were totally captivating. But tonight we heard this incredible breadth of your writing in a short period of time, and each one was just entertaining, totally fascinating. And Marie, we want to just keep hearing more. Everyone tonight was like this, just blowing our minds, and we expected that. But I mean, it's always still something so exciting to experience. Just really, really gorgeous, vivid and captivating writing, Marie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So true. A little bit of everything. I mean, that was just a smorgasbord in like 20 minutes of I mean, it's like that could be like a commercial for the MFA program. Just okay. You want to write this kind of thing?
What about this?
That kind of thing?
What about
this kind of thing? And I love the spiritual stuff. That's something that I do too. But that essay about the pigeon, about the dove, absolutely just gorgeous and totally fascinating. Why haven't literary journals just snapped all of these up yet, Marie? Tell us, have you sent these out?
So that poem or that essay, the original draft, in fact, until about 10 minutes before this started, it's still read a lot like a high school essay.
No.
And I read it to a friend, and she said, you need to tell more stories. And so I put in a little bit more about Charles Darwin. I love the fact that Henry Matisse gave Picasso the bird.
Yes.
And that wasn't in the draft until, as I said, about 10 minutes before this started.
Well, you know what? We love to hear when this reading opportunity kind of helps push people to read things, share things, edit things in a way that is just perfect. And we would never have known that you were maybe not so satisfied with it. It was incredible. Really, really great.
I love pigeons anyway, but I learned a lot about them.
I know. And it was so beautiful and entertaining. Just a lovely little essay. Send that out, Marie. And the other poems too.
Now that it doesn't sound like a high school essay, I'm willing to send it out.
No, I didn't get that feeling. I didn't get that feeling at all. It just sounded like just a totally polished, really fun sort of little ode to the pigeon essay. I just absolutely loved it. Well, Marie, thank you so much for joining our recent grad night tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your pieces. And we need to also say thank you to the amazing Michael Dunaway, Holly Hagman, and Robert Piazza as well. One more round of applause for our incredible readers and writers tonight.
Sharing the screen with them is just amazing.
It's absolutely. Marie, just one quick question before we kind of close out the night. Are you working on a manuscript right now? Are you focusing on any particular area in terms of poems or essays, or are you sending out pieces? What is your main focus right now as a writer?
I actually am focusing mostly on the collection of poems I'm calling it tentatively Gospel Voices. There's something about it. Almost every week a new poem pops into my head.
Yes.
And the other things I think I have to work harder on to get the idea. And as Holly mentioned, with her flash fiction, poems are short. I can do a poem without the longer pieces just take so much out of me.
I get it.
There are so many words in the longer pieces, and poems, you're focusing on each word, but there are fewer of them.
Right. It's a different kind of sort of way to focus your energy and duration of the. I know what you mean. Mean.
But then there's the old saying, I'm sorry this letter is so long. I didn't have time to write a short one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's how it goes.
Absolutely right.
It's I think it's really hard to write short.
Yes, that too.
But,
and you can spend, I'll spend years editing a poem that's like half a page.
Yes. Well, the VNL that I wrote went through at least 2 dozen drafts, at least.
Right. Absolutely. For me, that's like every single poem, whether it's like 3 or 4 pages. Sometimes if it's 3 or 4 pages, it comes out pretty ready. I only edited a little bit, but these little tiny ones where it's just like every single word really, 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 really counts.
Yes.
Or especially like a poem in a form too. Like, oh, could I get a better word, a better sound, a better rhythm here? I hear you, Marie. Thank you so much, Marie.
You're welcome. I was just going to say, you were saying about a word. I just had a discussion with someone about recognizing and acknowledging mean 2 different things.
Yeah. Yes.
That's so true.
That's absolutely right. And I love having those conversations too. Oh, we could just get into it, Marie. I understand. I hear you. I hear you. And you know what? I end up explaining stuff like that on a near daily basis as an ESL teacher in like intermediate and advanced levels. Like, what is the difference between these 2 words, which are, kind of synonyms in some ways? And it's like, ooh, let's talk about it. I have like a poetic moment at the same time. That's so cool. All right. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thank you.
You know what, Chris? What an amazing night it was tonight.
Truly amazing. And, the whole show could be an advertisement for the Fumfa program.
Yes, it certainly could.
I think anybody who watched this would be impressed and would say, sign me up.
So, that was just 4 amazing people: Rob Piazza, Holly Hagman, Michael Dunaway, Marie Mischel. Just imagine all the other incredible writers out there. Imagine yourself getting to do workshops and sharing your writing. And, that's one of the things we love the most about having been part of the program and also doing this live stream is the community, the amazing people we get to know, the work that we get to hear, and the ways that we're inspired by all of it. So we thank you, audience, for watching and joining us. We thank you, our lovely colleagues and friends and fellow writers. Thank you so much for kicking off the new year with us on tonight's live stream.
And we would be remiss if we did not note that our friend Philip J. Curtis has joined us at the last minute.
That's right. Hey, midnight.
Happy New Year, midnight. What does midnight do at midnight on New Year's Eve? That's what I want to know. He's
We're
named
gonna have
midnight.
to ask him. We gotta know.
He must have I hope he has some kind of ritual.
Well, I hope Midnight joins us next week because he has some friends who are regulars on Put It in the Chat in the Red or Green Books people. So
That's right.
Midnight, get your answer ready for us for next week, and we hope you all will join us next week for a really special group reading night, full of special guest readers who have their books coming out like right now or they've just recently come out. It's going to be an incredible night. We will see you then. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Peace.